So we have the Winnower, which we now know is a confirmed thing, but then I guess some of this stuff is maybe designed to be vague. I'm not sure if you have any insight on it, but how come loads of characters call the Traveler the Gardener, whereas, you would assume that the Gardener is something else, similar to the Winnower, and then underneath the Winnower, you have the Veil, and underneath the Gardener, you have the Traveler. Like, I always kind of assume the Traveler and the Veil are the counterparts, but the Traveler and the Veil aren't directly. But then at one point, one of the dissenters says about the Gardener and the Traveler, and then we saw this opposite, which is the Veil. But then it's just kind of, or just mainly, how come? Because the dissenter in the final, I think it's Iconoclasm, the final shape, final campaign mission, it does call the Traveler the Gardener. So, like, is the Traveler the Gardener, or is the Gardener above the Traveler, and the Veil?
So it's a bit of an it's a bit of an interesting mix, right? The Gardener is a term that's used in multiple contexts, but the context you're thinking of there is purely of the Society of the Precursors, right? Where they called the Traveler the Gardener.
Right.
So for them, perhaps there isn't a difference, or alternatively, it's just their naming convention that is deliberately trying to create the muddling. That being said, in the actual communications we got from the Winnower way back in Shadowkeep, it refers to the Gardener as a separate entity, seemingly.
Right.
Now, again, there is nothing explicitly where it says Traveler in those logs, so it could very well be the same, and that's kind of where the theory of, well, if the Veil is one of those great sources of darkness, and if the Veil and the Traveler seemingly were linked at one point, much like how the Winnower and the Gardener were supposedly in the Garden before time, and if they even operate on the same frequency of paracausal energy, which is something we learn from the Veil containment logs, maybe it is the case that then the Traveler is to the Veil as the Gardener is to the Winnower, and there is a deeper entity within each of them. I think it's also worth remembering that one of the big concept pieces that was never used in Lightfall or Final Shape, but there is an animated piece for it, is of a Guardian actually within a suit falling into the kaleidoscopic part of the Veil. And the idea of beings interacting with the Veil, be it Maya Sundaresh or the citizens of Neomuna, and actually entering it either through the kind of cloud arc digital reality that they've been able to create on top of things, or by actually physically interacting with it in a much closer manner, it's not a foreign concept. So just in the same way that we've gone inside the Traveler, you have to question if one day we might actually go inside the Veil. If so, maybe we don't meet the Winnower, because again, we didn't technically meet the Gardener inside the Traveler, but I mean, we kind of did. And even if we did go in there, what are we going to find? Or what are we going to see? What governs the interior of that dimension? I'm really fascinated by that question above all, because the underlying foundation and the vague hints within the lore are there. They're very prominently suggested at. Nothing is truly confirmed, and it gives Bungie the freedom to sort of write that story. I say Bungie. It gives the narrative team at Bungie the freedom to write those stories in the future. We've got to do this. We've got to differentiate between Bungie and the actual devs there. But yeah, no, it's exciting on that front, because it points in a direction, but we don't definitively know, and it gives them freedom to do what they want with that.
And the Winnower is the same character that Oryx spoke to when he communed with the Deep. Is that the same?
This is something we have more clarity on too. Yeah, no, a long time ago, but for those who don't know, old Hive lore, there's a thing called the Books of Sorrow, and at a certain point in time, Oryx communes with a being that is referred to as, quote, the Deep itself. And that seems to imply, in like later understandings of the lore, that Oryx was perhaps speaking to the Witness. But it was always something that didn't seem right, because the Witness and the Winnower used different pronouns, and the way that one spoke was completely different to the other. And it seems now very clear that, yes, Oryx was clearly talking to the Winnower instead of talking to the Witness. And it's also that way because their objectives are completely different, right? Like, the Witness wanted a perfect stillness where everything was kind of in a harmony, almost, but nothing would ever change. But the Winnower is change incarnate. It is literally the force of entropy pushing the universe towards a better version of itself, as the Winnower would see it, something where it is literally sharper, right? The Witness's interpretation of the final shape is not about sharpness, it's about no change whatsoever, and it's about stillness. So, yeah, it seems more clear now than ever that Oryx was talking to the Winnower all that time 9 years ago.
Yeah, definitely not the witness.
That's a huge thing all in itself, because it means that the claws this thing has go back way, way, way deeper. And I have very interesting thoughts about what's going to happen when it comes to heresy, because if there are interesting things going on with anything to do with the Dreadnought, there are relics and places and things that relate back to those conversations. So, I mean, if the Hive Pantheon is, as the narrative team is going to say, is being shaken up in a big manner, I wonder if that pertains partly to the Winnower.